to the core group and the senior players of that test team that allows for an environment that players can come in, feel settled so quickly, and then obviously perform as well as they have. So really pleased for the individuals. That's one of the great parts of the job is being able to tell someone that they're playing their first test, and then obviously to see them all perform so well in the roles that they've been given has been wonderful. But yeah, I think a lot of the credit there goes to the players and the staff that are around the group to allow them to settle in so comfortably. I think there was a few moving parts, obviously, for Scott to grab that opportunity, but you're always one thing that the last couple of years have taught us is that you've always got to have a few contingencies up your sleeve. So he's been on that radar. We've spoken a lot about our desire to try and build some depth and build some robustness within our teams. So yeah, I guess that it all just fell into place.
Thanks, George. Cheers.
Tom Decent.
Hey, George. Just wondering how much of a selection headache that is now with Scott and his figures, or is it sort of just inevitable that the big boys will come back?
No, it's a headache. It's a great headache. We don't mind a headache at this time of year, do we? So that all works out pretty well. I would much rather have that headache and some tough decisions to make than be scratching our heads trying to find a solution for a problem. So yeah, looking forward to working through that one. Obviously, some hard conversations to be had at some stage, but would love nothing more than a full squad to be able to pick from.
And just as well, now the sort of series is wrapped up, do you see value in giving Swepson a crack at the SCG? Obviously, with some future tours in the pipeline as well.
Yeah, if the conditions suit, we'd love to give Sweppo a crack. One of the things I think is really, really hard, and I think Michael Ness has been the biggest example of this over the last couple of years is that being on the periphery of some of the teams, particularly given some of the squad sizes we've had to carry as contingencies, it can make it really hard because you're so close, but you're not necessarily playing as much for your state or even your big bash franchise as you'd like. So we've got no doubt that whether it's the SCG or whether it's sometime in the future, that Sweppo's ready. Love having him around the group. Love everything he's bringing. His cricket gets better and better. He's a great young leader. So yeah, would love nothing more for him to get an opportunity, but it'll probably be conditions dependent.
Scott Bailey.
Yeah, George, just wondering, did you have plans on potentially resting? Obviously, Mitchell Stark's the only quick not to have missed the game so far. Did you have plans on potentially resting him going to Sydney? And do those plans, are they revisited or rethought given the way the Melbourne test is wrapped up and how few overs had to be bowled there in the end? One bone of contention. No one's ever resting, particularly the fast bowlers. There's no such thing as a rest, because if they're not playing, they're working their backsides off to get their physical conditioning right. So we need to stop using that word. But we also need to understand that there is at different stages, not just this series, but at different stages throughout the year, there's a hell of a lot of cricket across a range of formats, and that's a challenge. Talking about good headaches, the fact that we have Pat, Josh, and Mitch as three premier world-class fast bowlers across all three formats is a great problem, a great credit to them. That's how highly skilled they are. So it's something that you're always looking at. But I couldn't speak more highly of Starkey this series on the face of Hoff not being there. Paddy missing the second test. I'll echo Pat's words from the other day. I think he's stepped up and he has led the attack. I think he's bowling as well as I've ever seen. So if I could just go one more, is your plan for, and I definitely, management rather than the rest of it, is your plan for Sydney now different to what it was 6 days ago? When you, I imagine there's a fair bit of forward planning. I know don't know what your 11 is going to be, but you'd have a fair bit of forward planning there. Is your plan now different to what it was?
Yeah, well, your plans are constantly changing because you don't know what you can't probably
you've got no idea how many overs the bowlers are going to bowl, or whether you're going to bowl first or second, or bowling on the last day. So you've got to stay pretty fluid around that, and then obviously weigh up how guys are pulling up. So all of those effectively today would have been day 5. So our quicks in particular not having as heavy a workload as they had in Adelaide, and a couple of extra days off, which will all work in their favour.
Sam Landsberger.
Morning, George. Just wondering, outside of sort of the guys in the Ashes squad, with conditions so different for the tours coming up in 2022, who are some of the names that you're keeping an eye on, particularly maybe from a batting point of view, who you think might excel in those conditions that could potentially play Test cricket next year?
Sam, I'd prefer not to start singling out guys, but there's no doubt that playing in subcontinent conditions, Pakistan is a place we haven't toured for upwards of 20 years, I think. Sri Lanka, we know from tours in the past, can be particularly challenging as well. So all great challenges. And there can be different skill sets that are required. It's a bit of a hard one at times, because you can trawl through a lot of stats in Australia and look at who your perceived best players of spin are, but I think it's a very different spin, or the conditions are very different, and it's hard to necessarily get a read from one to the other. So inevitably, I think cricket, we talk a lot about it being a problem solving game. Your best cricketers tend to be your best problem solvers, and for a lot of them, it's just about exposing them to those conditions for long enough so that they start to get a feel of how to adapt their game.
So one more, sorry, if I could, George, just quickly, I think you're going to have to pick different teams for Pakistan and New Zealand, given how the schedule marries up again. Do you think that's sort of evidence that maybe there should be different coaches for both? I mean, is heading that way that different squads, splitting the coaching roles might make sense going forward?
Yeah, I think that's always something that could be looked at. I think depending on who the coach is, who the captain is, what your sort of mix is across the formats in terms of your, how many players go across formats, all those things, which are constantly changing, aren't they? They probably give you a different answer as to where you might go with that. How busy the schedules are, what World Cups are coming up. So all of those things provide different challenges. But I do think that we're certainly heading down and just obviously the last 2 years as well, the sacrifice that the staff, coaching staff and players have made in terms of time away from family, and the touring bit, there's always lots of time away from family, but then the added quarantines and challenges of being able to get home and actually spend some time with your family have got to be acknowledged.
Mitch Cleary.
George, just specifically on Josh Hazlewood, what do you need to see from him in the next 6 days in order for him to put his hand up?
I got pretty good faith in Hoff, knowing his own body and trusting his own body. So he'll build up as he would before any sort of test. I think he's having another bowl today. He'll obviously talk a lot with Andrew McDonald and David Beakley and the team to see how he's going. But I've got pretty good faith that if Hoff's confident and he says he's right to go, I think we back him in. He's earned that trust.
And just on Josh, does the series wrapped up now at 3-0 give you, I guess, greater strength to potentially ease him through one more and have him sit out one more, given the series is tied up and the potential for a recurrence of that injury?
Again, I think that's something that I think he'd want the injury to reoccur. So that's happy to leave that sort of decision with him and with with the guys that'll work with him from a physical point of view. I think if you talk to the players, I know the series is wrapped up, but I'm not entirely sure. They put a hell of a lot of pride and effort into each and every test, and I don't think the series being wrapped up will take away from that. For Hoff in particular, the opportunity to play a test match in his home state as well. So I think there's always plenty to play for.
Christy Doran, with George's bandwidth is a bit low there, guys, but we'll keep punching on. Christy.
Sure. Hi, George. Two-part question. The first being your philosophies as a selector. What do you think? Like, it seems like the decision to back players in, we saw Marcus Harris backed in again and succeed in Melbourne. Mitch Stark throughout the series earlier in the year, and Finch. Where did the idea of backing in players really stem from? And secondly, can you just give us an idea around how Tony's really added to the selection committee too?
Well, yeah, I don't think it's a novel approach and novel to sport that wherever people work, they want to feel that they've got the backing of their colleagues and their teammates and whatever it may be. So I think there's an enormous amount of pressure on these athletes, and it's not every time, but when there's an opportunity to provide them some clarity and some support, I think it makes sense that we offer that to them. There's obviously been a huge amount of interest in this series as an example, and that's within a window of time. If you can alleviate some of that mental pressure in the build up, then I think you can get some really positive benefits out of it. It's not, the opportunity might not be there every single time. There might be decisions that are left up to the last minute, but I think once you are clear in your own minds that you've got the team or you've got the player you want, then it's important to provide them the support that I think anyone would like. And what was the second bit?
Sorry, just the second part was just on Tony and how he's added to the selection kind of committee, as well as Justin Langer. Has his role kind of changed a little bit during this series or over the last 6 months in terms of selection?
I think with what we've found with Tony is someone who, obviously with the roles that he's had in the past, just around the analytical and the process orientated nature, but he understands what it feels like. He's talked a couple of times about being a player who's at times been in and out. So reflecting back on his own career, so he's able to bring that lens. Loves watching the game, so that's been a great benefit. Nice to have a fast bowler. It's a subtle point of difference, but that's a nice little angle to bring to the panel as well. And he's just a good thinker. He asks great questions. That I think this sort of week was the first opportunity that he'd had to be around the group, and that the feedback was just worked in with the team. Highly respectful, asked lots of questions, really interested in learning about how the team dynamic works, and the value that he is adding and will continue to add will just grow and grow. We actually haven't seen each other face to face yet since he's taken on the role, so looking forward to that opportunity in the coming weeks as well.
Marty Smith.
Thanks, Cole. Hi, George. I'm just picking up on something you said earlier, particularly with that Pakistan tour in terms and conditions. Obviously, you haven't played there in 20 years. Based on the brief number of tests that have been over there recently, what are your expectations in terms of conditions, in terms of how much spin is going to play a role and how much pace is going to play a role? Do you have any sort of concept of what it's going to be like?
No, I think we sort of talked about that recently. We'll probably look for a little bit of first class data just to see how much cricket's played at that time of year. It'll be at the back end of the PSL, so you'd imagine that some of those wickets back end of the season, so some of those wickets will start possibly to get a little bit tired. The one thing I think we've seen in some of the subcontinent conditions in the past is that they're pretty good at being able to make wickets that highlight the strengths of whatever their team may be. So it's the one bit that I'm probably pretty excited about, to be honest, because I feel like we're in a place where we have cover and really strong options across the board, whether the wickets do turn or whether Pakistan have got an incredibly strong fast bowling unit. If they do try and make the wickets a little greener, if they try and make them good batting wickets, I think we've got a really strong squad that can cover all bases.
And just one quick one on Will Pucovski. Is he a chance for that Pakistan tour, given he won't be playing Shield cricket for at least another month? Or have you sort of put a line through him and just want him to get back into Shield cricket, and you can look to get him back in the national setup beyond that Pakistan tour?
No, certainly wouldn't put no line through him. But that certainly for Will, I think what's most important is him just getting back and playing cricket first and foremost. So I've excited to see that he's nearly back from Melbourne. So that's great, and he'll continue to build from there.
Thanks, George.
7 Sydney.
Hey, George. So Chris Silverwood was ruled out of the Sydney test today. He was made a close contact. Is that a bit worrying that COVID, is it almost derailed the Melbourne test? There's an outbreak going to the England team, and they're coming up here to Sydney, where we had 12,000 cases today. Is that a bit worrying that it could have an effect on the series?
I don't think it's particularly unexpected. There's been a power load of work, and I wouldn't be across a quarter of it behind the scenes to try and ensure that the series can go ahead, and there's contingencies and plans that are in place. So I guess the positive thing so far is that no players have tested positive. So and that both teams have some depth in their squads. Should something happen, but I think trying to get that balance right of making sure the tour goes ahead and allowing the country to keep chugging along and the players to keep chugging along and live a bit of a life that it's been a pretty good balance so far.
Do you guys have a backup plan for if there's a COVID outbreak in the Australian camp?
Yeah, I'm sure there would be, but that's well above my area. I would just take advice, I think, from our medical team and who are doing such a huge amount of work and have done a huge amount of work over the last couple of years on a number of fronts to ensure that not only this series but women's international series, Big Bashes, WBBLs have gone ahead.
And one more question, if that's okay. Speaking of the selection committee, Chris Silverwood is England's sole selector. Do you think that throws up any disadvantages, considering that you've got a 3-person panel? And do you think that could provide any problems, or it has provided any problems this series for England?
No, not for me to answer, mate. I think we're pretty grateful that our players and staff are doing a wonderful job, at the moment, and we know that international sport's bloody hard, and the wheel will turn at some stage, and we'll just keep worrying about it ourselves on that front, I think.
Couple more to go. Thanks, here, guys. Go to Andrew Wu.
Yeah, g'day, George. Not too sure whether you're with the team now or if you'll be jumping on the charter flight to Sydney, but would there be any trepidation being on the same plane as I suppose the England guys, given the outbreak within their camp?
Yeah, again, mate, I think the medical staff will work through that and deal with it, come up with a plan.
Yeah, and on Marcus Harris, I suppose he struggled for a few runs early, but with the 70 odd on the week, you feel like that could be the making of him as a test player, and sort of have you assessed his performances in the first 3 games?
I still think what we said at the start of the series around Harry is trying to people look at how many tests someone's played, but looking at them as a whole versus actually splitting up where those opportunities have come and trying to give someone a run at it. And I think Harry's looked really good throughout the series. Been a couple of good catches that have dismissed him at different times. Can't give enough credit for that knock last week. Given the challenge of the wickets and opening batter, everyone talked about it being a new ball wicket, and for him to face the balls that he did and get through that innings, sort of hold the Australian innings together, be the glue there, which is exactly what you're after from an opening batter. Attacked when he needed to attack. I thought that was a great example of how Harry can play and can contribute really well to this team. So really pleased for him.
Thanks, George.
Dan Cherney.
G'day, George. Just wondering about Tim Payne. Have you spoken to him recently, and has he given any indication as to whether he might seek to return to cricket, and if there's any timeline on that?
Yeah, spoken to him recently, but no, we haven't talked any cricket.
Awesome, guys. That looks as though that's all the questions we've got here. So thanks everyone for joining, and thanks to George Bailey for sharing some of his time with you guys today. We'll catch up with all you guys in the next couple of days. Thank you.